is Lindy Fischer. I am a sophomore dance and advertising major.
Or merely dreaming we were snow.
I started dancing formally at the age of 3, but I grew up around my parents' dance studio, so I was constantly surrounded by dancers. I was diagnosed with Hallux Rigidus in my left foot, and that means that I have limited mobility in the left big toe joint, so whenever there's pressure or excessive bending of the toes, I struggle with finding mobility. I started point work at the age of 11, and this is when I noticed my injury started to develop. Before, when I only danced in flat shoes, I had full mobility in both of my feet, and as I started to dance on point, I noticed excessive pressure and some limitation in my left foot. I find my limitation affects my dancing in all genres, so whenever there's excessive bending of the toes, I feel extreme pressure and limitation in my joint. An example of this is in ballet class, especially on flat or in technique classes when we're at the bar. Whenever we go to releve, especially in balances, I find I have to engage different muscles to compensate for the immobility of my toe joint. At the end of dance classes and performances, I feel a lot of pressure, especially about an hour or two after, once my feet get cold and my muscles are not as warm. And things I do to relieve the pain include rolling out my foot, especially my arches, because since I don't have mobility this way, I never stretch out the muscles in my arch. So I do that by rolling out on the bar in class or with the ball. And then I also ice my joint every night, especially after point rehearsals and point classes, because that's where I feel the most pressure in my foot. Something I recently discovered are perfect fit toe pads, and these are inserts that go into our point shoes. So usually dancers use just little sock-like toe pads that go inside of the shoe to help reduce the pain. But because of the shape of my foot and all of the pressure on my joint, because it's not shaped naturally, I guess, I feel a lot of pressure where there's bone deformation. And so these toe pads come in a kit, and they come with a putty that fills in all of the negative space in a point shoe. Using perfect fit toe pads have really helped equalize the pressure that I feel on my joint in point class and the effects that I feel after point. Having this injury has allowed me to have a greater sense of my body and where my alignment is in dance. Otherwise, I feel I wouldn't pay such specific attention to certain muscles or where my weight is being placed. It also has allowed me to become a greater problem solver, especially when dancing, because I am constantly modifying moves in ballet and other genres in order to prevent injury, as well as giving myself the most mobility I can while keeping my body safe. Because my injury is pretty limiting, I'm usually constantly aware of what it limits me to do, which becomes pretty frustrating. But it also has made me aware of what I can do even with the limitation, and so I find myself pouring even more effort and energy into things that I can be free to do, even with having this. One example is jumps in ballet. I'm very fond of petit allegro and grand allegro because even though it still causes pressure on my foot, it's something that isn't as noticeable, or my injury is not as noticeable, and therefore I spend lots of time and practice and enjoy feeling the freedom of doing and executing this step without the injury being in the way. The advice I'd have for a dancer dealing with something similar is to realize that your injury is not a weakness, it's only a limitation, but it doesn't limit you. You can still do something even if it's not cookie cutter ballerina or if it doesn't fit the standards of other people, and it's not something to be ashamed of. For years in high school, before I took the time to really analyze and look at my injury and what it affects, I felt a lot of shame, and like there was a part of me that needed to be fixed rather than something that was just me, and that limited me from trying to do other things, or honestly, I didn't have the confidence to do things such as releve balances, as simple as that, at the bar, because as soon as a guest teacher or someone who I had not communicated with would come in, that would be the first thing they would point out, which it's not a cookie cutter thing, but it makes me me, and I can't change it, so there's nothing wrong with me. So that would be my advice.
A siren sounds like the goddess who promises endless apologies of paradise. And only she can make it right. So things are different.